A sorcerer helps a fellow conjurer exact revenge against a mutual nemesis while searching for his thought-to-be dead wife in Roger Corman's 1963 comedy horror film, The Raven, starring Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre, and a very young Jack Nicholson. That's the movie we're unearthing this week on Movie Bones. There are some movies, Ryan, where the only difference between it and a bunch of 10-year-olds putting on a show is the quality of the mugging, I think. And I think we may have found one of those movies today, Ryan.
I'm going to agree with your statement.
No disagreement there. Okay. We saw the same movie then. Yes.
Yes, we saw the same movie.
So, folks, as you know, if you're watching alongside of us, we're covering The Raven, which, despite Ryan's insistence last week that the film isn't based on Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem of the same name, the end credits in this movie seems to take issue with that statement. It's like he heard you or something. And It says basically, oh, yes, it is. However, I think on balance, I'm inclined to take Ryan's point of view in the matter. The film starts with Vincent Price's Dr. Erasmus Craven. It's funny, see, because it's got Raven in it. Get it? Get it? Mourning the second anniversary of his wife Lenore's death, when he gets a visit from, you guessed it, the Raven from the title. The bird speaks because he's actually a fellow sorcerer by the name of Dr. Bedloe, as played by Peter Lorre, who, after being restored to human form, tells Craven that his wife is alive and at the castle of Dr. Scarabus, or as I like to say it, Dr. Scarybus, because that's how I kept hearing it in my mind, who's also the one who turned him into a raven. With the mutual interests of love and revenge, they set off together to seek justice of sorts. Craven's daughter and Bedloe's son, played by an almost unrecognizably young Jack Nicholson, tag along for the hijinks that ensue. And Ryan, there are hijinks, aren't there?
Yes, there are definitely hijinks in this movie.
It's even from the beginning. The story itself, it has hijinks, but when you think of the word hijinks, you think of like a madcap, high-energy, film. It's almost misleading in a way because the hijinks are just kind of mixed with this very casual, I'd almost call it like the movie feels half improvised and half scripted.
Yeah, I agree with that point. So, real quick, this movie I think is supposed to be a comedy of sorts.
I think it's a comedy first, and if there's anything scary, quote unquote, in it, it's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. I will say this, and this is nothing against the comedy it tries to do in the movie. I will say this. Like, I didn't super know if it was supposed to be a comedy, like, right out the gate. And then, for me, I don't know why. I'm not saying that this would happen for every single person. But it was right at the beginning of the movie. His daughter, who is his daughter from his first marriage.
Yeah.
We don't even really talk about that.
No, I don't.
In the movie. But anyways, his daughter, she's going to go to bed. But she brings him a beverage, and it's when she says, "Here's your warm milk," and I was like, "This is not a serious movie." That was the moment that I knew. I was like, "This movie is not serious, and it's not about to take itself seriously." I don't know why. It's just warm milk. I was like, No.
I think for me, it's like the moment when, and I guess I could almost pass it off because it's a Roger Corman film, and we'll get into Roger Corman in a bit. If you know anything about Roger Corman, he's not the most careful director in the world. And when you see a moment early on where Vincent Price is going to check the window and he bonks his head into this telescope thing, and you wonder, is that on purpose or or did that just happen and he just didn't bother with another take? And I'm like, and so you don't know for sure, but it's like after he goes back and he dodges it, now that could be an improv too, where he comes back and he's like, oh, I'm paying attention to the thing I bonked my head on. So it's like, okay, I think it's a comedy. And that's kind of where it got me. There's a couple different first moments in this where you wonder, kind of, your footing's not so sure. The young man who plays Dr. Bedloe's son, who he shows up at the front door, and the first time, this is actually the second time I've seen this. This is the first time you've seen it, right, Ryan?
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it.
But the first time I saw this, it took me until that man, the one who plays Dr. Bedloe's son, is driving the coach towards Dr. Scarabus's castle. And he's supposed to be taken over or possessed kind of by Dr. Scarabus remotely. So he gets this really manic look on his face. And that's the moment I put 2 and 2 together. It's like, you talk about like putting 2 and 2 together. It's Jack Nicholson. Because I didn't look at the whole cast lot the first time I saw it. But it's like super young Jack Nicholson, right?
It looks like you can see the appearance, but doesn't sound like Jack Nicholson. And I can't do a Jack Nicholson impersonation like correctly, but he doesn't have that way of talking, like that kind of way of talking.
Yeah,
that he's kind of famous for a lot of his later movies. But he's just got, I would say, I don't want to call it a normal voice, but he's got a very normal voice. That's the best way to put it.
And I think
so you're not really entirely ready for it to be him.
Yeah. But once you see it though, I saw it, then I can't not see it. Because especially then it's like the eyebrows, those sharp jutting eyebrows, and the sharp chin, and then it's like you just see the expression on his face from time to time. It's like, oh yeah, that's the Jack I know, kind of a thing. And as for the voice, I think actually this is a part of his career where he was still kind of developing himself as an actor, I think.
Yeah.
You can feel that a little bit. But there are a lot of other actors in the film who are not newbies at all, right, at this point.
Yeah.
You have 2 veterans of horror coming together in Vincent Price and in Boris Karloff. And I have to say, of the 2 leads, I think Boris Karloff still edges out Vincent Price, I think, just in terms of, especially before he reveals his plot, right? He's playing the bad guy in this, but before he reveals himself that way, he's very much kind of playing it cool, like, I don't know a thing about these charges you're accusing me of. And while he's doing that, I said, that's actually pretty charming. Of all the performances, he's the one that I think is like, that's the one that's probably my favorite of all the characters. And Vincent Price does a pretty good job too. He's kind of got a genial, amiable nature to himself.
Boris Karloff being in a comedy movie was a little bit, I don't know, I'm not going to say off-putting. That's not the right word, but it was a bit, I would say shocking, because everything he's been in is pretty much serious, or he plays a serious character.
Yeah. And I think the last thing we saw him in was like the Body Snatcher, which you couldn't get much more serious than that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and then there's this almost, like, the way these characters interact with each other at times, and it's the way the actors portray them, it feels like, yeah, they can be mortal enemies, but they also probably could just hang out very, very gentlemanly towards each other.
That's when it's like the most fun for me, when they're just hanging out, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I will say this too. This is not necessarily about the acting. It's more about the setting and everything. I don't know. It didn't throw me out of the movie, but like a movie like this, even if it was taking itself seriously, so it made it more of a horror element, the setting, I don't think does a good job of kind of pushing that, because I don't know. It's like, I realized not too late into the movie, but I realized a good chunk into the movie, I was like, oh, this is set in like medieval times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it's something like that set in medieval times, I don't know. It gives me more of a fantasy element to it, which there was fantasy. Like, a lot of this was fantasy, but, I was thinking like this kind of spooky, creepy kind of castle. This is like an actual castle set in medieval times. They're not kings or queens. They're just sorcerers that have built a fortune and all that. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I don't know. That just kind of...
I see what you're getting at, because...
Didn't downplay it.
I didn't actually think of it consciously about the era it's supposedly set in, until the second watching of it. It does have to do with the setting. I think it's because the setting looks like it was kind of like a cheap version of like, or an expensive Renaissance festival, or a cheap version of Disney's Haunted Mansion, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like, I would say it's sort of an issue, but it's sort of an issue because, I'm thinking that these people are living in just kind of creepy places. And then I see their tights, and I'm like, well, I see like Jack Nicholson's character's tights, and I'm like, oh, this is straight up medieval.
Yeah, and everyone's,
okay, then.
And everyone's very clean, and all the colors are perfect. So it just doesn't feel very old in that sense. So that's why I think it very much feeds into that. Feels like it was filmed like it was filmed yesterday, or at least 40 years ago, or 50, 60 years ago, whatever. Yeah, 60 years ago now. But yeah, it does have that feeling to it. I did appreciate some of the campier elements. I had heard that Peter Lorre actually did some improvisation. It's hard to tell which parts are, like I said, improvised and which ones aren't, because I think the script is very loose. But Peter Lorre supposedly he did some improvisation, and that actually, looking that up, led to some of the funnier parts. Dr. Erasmus's, basement, his laboratory area, it's full of cobwebs and stuff, and Peter Lorre just comes out with the line, it's like, hard place to keep clean, like the way he delivers it is like, well, actually, I got a chuckle out of that. And the way that they're dressing, they're getting dressed to go out in coats and such, and Dr. Erasmus is helping, Dr. Bedloe with his coat, and then it's like, oh, wear this as a hat, and it's like, it looks ridiculous, and it's like, it looks like they're playing dress up all of a sudden. It's just little things like that I wouldn't have anticipated. And they're fun. I mean, they're not like something you chew on for very much for a lot of humor sake, but for one watching, it's not that bad, for that part, for that kind of stuff. And I hope I'm not making it sound like I like the movie too much, because really, in the end of the day, it's not where I'm going with this.
Yeah. I'm trying to I'm not trying to bash the movie, but there are some elements of this movie that made me go, just.
Yeah, it's
like,
on
for
the
instance,
edge.
some of the story elements. I kind of want to talk about more of the story elements.
Sure.
Some of the story elements threw me off a little bit. For instance, he has a daughter, so it's very clear that her mom died. That's the only thing that could have happened to her. I really thought maybe he was pining over. That was the death he was pining over. And now he goes on to say, no, it was just that, tells the audience that that's her stepmom.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like, I was sitting there, and I know I shouldn't take it too seriously, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? If my dad married some other person, whether he loved them or not, and then was like this down bad about their death while I'm the kid from his first marriage, it was kind of a weird relationship dynamic.
It makes you feel kind of like, as the kid, it makes you feel like, you weren't kind of over your previous relationship in a healthy way before you got involved with the new one. That's what it tells me.
Then you're also, I'm not against this part, but I mean, it's very clear that she's there and that Jack Nicholson's characters are there to just be like one of those forced love interests.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here are these two young, attractive people. They're love interest.
Yep. Here's the guy. Here's the girl.
And I don't lie. I was a bit confused by the whole, I guess, the lady that he used to love is alive thing.
Yeah.
It kind of confused me.
I can see that. I mean, I can understand that. It's just because it kind of thing just makes you wonder, well, how did you get fooled? There's an actual body in that coffin. We look at it. The audience gets a nice look at it, of course.
To add to that real quick before you keep going, then the whole his dad part, I thought would confuse me too. I'm like, so is his dad alive?
Oh, yeah, because he actually moves. He actually talks in a very kind of groaning, undead way. But yeah, it was, and he actually makes a cameo at the end because I think, it was Boris Karloff's character. He makes himself look like the dead dad, I guess, to distract him during the battle. Which, by the way, it was a very anticlimactic, final battle. But there's a lot of stuff that just gets thrown in there, And I think that's another trademark of Corman, is that he doesn't really think through his ideas all that well, and so it feels very kind of hodgepodge. Let's talk about Corman for a moment, because how familiar are you with Roger Corman?
Me? I mean, I know the name. Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like there's probably some other movies I've watched that he's done, and I'm actually going to look it up as we're talking about it. But off the top of my head, I'm not super familiar with him.
And then I'll say this, that having come from a background of Mystery Science Theater, I am very familiar with his name because he's one of the more well-known cheap B-movie directors. But he's kind of stands apart from the other ones in that here's a director who ends up launching the careers of so many good or great actors, directors, cinematographers, composers. Jack Nicholson, of course, we have in today's film, who he worked with, I think, 4 times. We're going to watch another one of their collaborations next week. You have Francis Ford Coppola, which, if you're familiar with The Godfather, went on to direct The Godfather, but had a bit of a start with Corman as an assistant director, uncredited. You have Charles Bronson, Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese, James Horner, who did the scores for Wrath of Khan, Apollo 13, Braveheart, and other films like that. You have Sylvester Stallone, Ron Howard, and Janusz Kaminski, who's the cinematographer for some of the best shot films I've ever seen in like Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List. And all these people have a connection to this man. And when they were still unknowns, and that's what sets him apart, because there are 1,000 bad movie B directors, but only one of them that I'm aware of, has kind of, out of the pile of manure that he had a bunch of bouquet of flowers growing up through it. It's fertilizer well placed, I guess.
I'm looking at some of his movies right now that I know have either been remade and have gone on to be popular in their own way. The Little Shop of Horrors, that's one of them.
Yeah.
Probably more familiar with The Little Shop of Horrors that stars, oh my goodness.
Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis, yeah. Rick Moranis, that's the more popular one. Another one, this was actually remade recently, The House of Usher, which is an Edgar Allan Poe movie. He directed that, also starring Vincent Price. That was remade not long ago on, I think, a Netflix TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It was well received. Those are two of the big ones. But it's like, wow, he really is a fan of Poe. The Raven, which that's based off the poem, and you can see, for those of you that are familiar with the poem, you can see what they did in this movie to kind of connect it, but it's still, Poe's work is meant to be taken, seriously, and this is not a serious movie.
No,
and I don't want to bash it for that, because if you want to try to spin something, I can't knock you for that kind of creativity, but I'm just saying that, it's not a serious film. It's not trying to be a serious film. I don't think it's trying to be a serious film.
No, it's definitely not. It seems to mostly know its niche and generally stay there. Or like I said, it wanders not so much in the genre, but just in terms of its screenplay. What's your verdict, man? What do you come down on this?
I'm going to go with Bad Dates. I'm going to be honest with you about something real quick. I want to be honest with the audience. I'll try to be honest at all times. So I started watching this movie late at night on Sunday. I believe it was Sunday. Everyone was in bed, and I was like, you know what? I need to go ahead and watch this movie because we're ready for this. And I knew, I kind of have a busy week ahead of me, and I didn't want to just be rushing to watch a movie. So I watched it late at night, just planning on staying up late. I was trying my darndest to not fall asleep during that final fight.
It is boring.
It's boring, and I was already tired because I usually go to bed earlier anyways. So, yeah. But it was they were just sitting there. I mean, honestly, that's what they were doing. They were just sitting there, and then things changed.
It's essentially the same action over and over again. You have one attacking the other, it deflects it, or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then you see the same thing from the other guy, and it goes back and forth. And it's not like they're getting imaginative with it. Not like the stakes are getting raised with each new attack or anything. It's just the same thing until finally, randomly, Dr. Erasmus, Vincent Price, he wins. He wins. Yay, the movie's over, right? Yes, it's over.
And we kind of knew that he was it's one of those situations where it's well, he's got to win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's not a suspenseful film.
So, yeah, I would give it a Bad Dates. I almost want to give it a Nuke the Fridge, but I don't know. There's not enough fun for me in this film to say Nuke the Fridge.
I think our verdicts are pretty much the same. It's like you said, there's bits in here and there one can latch on to enjoy once.
Yeah.
And I'm not sorry for having seen it, for all that. Watching Jack Nicholson while he's still in that early phase of his career and developing into the actor we all would know him later as, that's got value in it. Seeing Karloff play nice and duplicitous is always fun.
Yeah.
Goofy moments here and there, the coat putting on sequence, all the odd stuff that's fun once, because you don't expect anything from the movie. I didn't expect anything from it. And because of that, I was able to enjoy myself okay. That said, I'm not likely to watch this again, but maybe once ever in my life, and that's only because I have a greater affinity for cheesy films than most people. I do think there is, if you combine Bad Dates with Nuke the Fridge, in other words, once and done film, you can have some Nuke the Fridge fun with it once. So that's what it is. It's Nuke the Fridge on Bad Dates.
Yeah, I agree. I can understand that feeling of that movie.
So now's the time when we'd like to remind the listening audience out there that if you're having fun watching these movies with Ryan and me and want to hear more from us, remember to like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your podcast purveyor of choice. And folks, if you haven't already had your fill of Roger Corman and Jack Nicholson films, well, you're in luck. Because Ryan, tell them what we got lined up next week.
Our next movie is also released in the same exact year. So I'm sure that will have a lot to play with this.
Which reminds me, I just want to add one thing. It's like the reason why he's able to get 2 films like that in the same year with the same actors. I read that he filmed this one, The Raven, in 15 days. So there you go.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, folks, get yourself ready for a movie that might wind up being true to its own name, The Terror. Also starring Boris Karloff, also starring Jack well, I don't want to say starring, but also featuring a young Jack Nicholson.
Yes. It makes me think they got like a 2-for-1 deal with these actors, you know? I'll sign it for one movie, but we're going to film 2 actually at once. He's like, you know,
yeah.
I got you for 30 days. We'll do 15 days in this one, 15 days in that one, and it'll be perfect. You know, but that's what we got going next week, guys. Well, Ryan, I don't think there's much more to do. So I guess until next time, folks out there, have a good one. And I hope you'll watch it with us. Watch The Terror with us. Won't you? See you next week, Ryan.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.